Shout out to USARK and all the USARK members. If you don't know what USARK is, do not be ashamed. Simply click on the third link in the description below. Go to usark.org. See what it's all about. See how you could actually protect your own collection whenever legislation might hit your backyard. You just never know. Things are changing constantly in the reptile hobby, and it's good to know when things are creeping up in your area. So shout out to Phil Goss, shout out to Vanessa, shout out to Jeremy, shout out to all the USARK supporters and teammates out there. Cannot wait to see how much we fight this year to keep our animal rights. And if you're not a USARK member, talk to your fellow keepers and just let them know what USARK's all about, and they're here to protect our animal rights. Shout out to USARK and all the USARK supporters.
T-minus 30 seconds. T-minus 20 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Trap Talk Reptile Network, the coolest reptile network in the world. Welcome to All Monitor Talk. I'm your host, Kat, and with me is Brandon from Canadian Cold Blood.
Welcome, everyone.
Please do me a favor and drop a like and subscribe if you enjoy this podcast. And also don't forget to hit the notification bell so that you can know whenever we're next having an episode. All right, so welcome, guys. I'm excited. So first off, before we start, you guys probably noticed that Mike is not on here with me right now. And that's because he is deciding to focus on his other podcast now with Nick Lillis. But yeah, it's a great podcast. It's called Monitor Brains. So you can still watch him on there. So be sure to go ahead and, get your fill of Mike and Nick over on Monitor Brains. And Mike, I'm gonna miss you. I know you're watching right now. It was great while it was going on. So now I'd like to welcome Brandon from Canadian Cold Blood. Welcome. Thank you for being my co-host.
No problem. Thanks for the opportunity. This will be fun. New for me to be on the other side of the podcast now, for sure.
Right. All right. So now I'm going to welcome Janice. All right. Let's get her on here if I can. Oh, there we go. Here we go. Hey, Janice.
Hey, how are you? Thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah. So this is Janice. Hold on. I got to look and see. Horochak. It's so terrible. I try not to butcher it.
Practice this before, Catherine.
I know. So Janice breeds Cordensis, and she's been very successful with her pair. It just kind of unexpectedly happened, right, Janice? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I got Lilu back in 2020 during the pandemic. Back, I guess it was May. And then I actually had an opportunity to get Corbin, who is a wild caught. Obviously, Lilu is captive bred. And I was told that they very rarely breed in captivity. And then they kind of settled in. A lot of trials and tribulations of, adapting to these animals, because I kind of jumped in a little too soon. And then they started breeding. And last year, I actually had 4 clutches. So, I think I'm doing something right.
So why Cordensis, though? How did you even get into that? You just were one day I want tree monitors.
I know I was looking at John, it's Dragna. I think that's how you pronounce his name. He was posting a lot of the different monitors, and I was really intrigued by the tree monitors because you can have a smaller space. You don't necessarily need a water feature for tree monitors as long as you're keeping up the humidity and spraying pretty regularly. And I felt like that was the more even though they were more expensive, it was a smaller footprint for, their enclosures and things like that. Obviously, I've since have like a play area and, enrichment areas and things like that. But it's, I have their basic enclosures and here we are today. It was like, I saw one posted, I asked some questions and like I said, I jumped in probably a little too soon and they were trying to get rid of the animal, well, not get rid of them, but sell the animals. So I gotta like, oh yeah, that's fine. And when I kind of found out, I'm like, okay, well, we got to get a little bit more prepared if they do start breeding because of like the potential of female hormones, and them potentially going after the males and obviously stress level and things like that. So, I made it happen. I got, two new enclosures for them. And yeah, that's history. I mean, I do a very basic setup. We have Corbin because he was a wild caught. So we had a lot of issues with trying to clear parasites from him when I first got him, because I, also being a new to tree monitors, I'm sure that was another thing too. And not knowing how stressful it can be. And you have to make it their idea to come to you, basically. So I don't have any plants in my enclosures, but I do have bark on the walls. I have a basic nest. So it's a small black office trash can, but then I have it topped with cork bark flats and it positioned just right. And Lilu loves it. She's laid in that. I do have probably about almost a foot in diameter cork round with the bottom closed in. So she can lay in that. She has laid in that. She's also laid in, I have a diagonal round that's just loose in the enclosure. And she actually laid at the very bottom of that in the substrate at the bottom. So it's like, we never know what we're going to get, but I want to have different options for her. I actually use to regulate the heat in the bottom for the nest. I usually just use a seed mat and I have it basically vertically. So it's surrounding two sides of the trash can, and just dial it in for like temps and check the soil a couple times here and there. Like I said, it's very unconventional of how I got into this.
Awful. The nest box is a trash can, but
yeah, I do the same thing though. I do the same thing. I use a trash can too. But hey, I just want to say, because Tam sent a super chat. So thank you, Tam. Thank you very much. All right, go ahead.
So let me ask you this then. What reptiles did you have before the Cordo pair?
I had a bearded dragon prior to this.
Okay, so it was quite the leap to get into tree.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So you out of anything you could have purchased after the bearded dragon, you decided to go with tree monitors. And
yeah, I mean, they're just so interesting. Like I always say, the bearded dragon is the pug of the reptiles, and then the tree monitor's more like a whippet, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But I did grow up when my brothers were fishers, and I feel so horrible of all the pets that I've lost, not knowing how to take care of them, because they'd bring home a frog or a newt or a turtle, and we did the best care that we could. Obviously, I know horrible, but I didn't know any better. I was a little kid, but anytime, I feel like I'm trying to redeem myself if I see somebody pick up a turtle and I see them on Facebook, I say, hey, you may want to consider leaving them go back, or make sure you're at least giving them proper care with UVB and things like that. I know I'm that person, but it's just you live and learn, right?
Yeah.
So when you said, okay, I like the tree monitors, and you had, 6 species of tree monitor to choose from, right? Blues, yellows, greens, blacks, bomei, and cordos. You looked at the cordos and went, damn, I have to have those ones. What was it about them?
It wasn't even like that, right? No? I thought that they were a little bit on the smaller side. I love blues. Okay. I think if I go back, I'm probably going to get blues. And of course, Tam, if he's on listening, he was like, oh, why don't you get some blues the other day?
Yeah, Janice out here. Yeah.
And the answer to that is my partner would kill me.
Oh,
Okay.
no.
Yeah, it's just because, I mean, in terms of like a first tree monitor, in my experience, they're really overlooked. I mean, nobody, seems to consider cordensis right away, right? Even me, when I was like building my groups, I had to import a lot of my adults that I currently work with because there was just no captive bred around 15, 14 years ago. And I remember seeing the Indo list and there was cordensis on there, but I was already spending a ton of money on, blues, greens, whatever. And I was like, the cordensis can wait. And then fast forward 15 years later and I couldn't find any, right? So, or 12 years later, I couldn't find any. So it seems like an odd initial choice, but if you're
so it was posted on one of the groups and I'm like, okay, well, let's see what this is about. And I kind of was maybe pushed into the sale a little bit. But at the same time, I hear they're the puppy dogs of the tree monitors. Like I can hear the blues can be pretty spicy. So like with nipping and things like that, I actually have only just recently got bitten on the ear by Corbin, and I think he was ready to go with Lilu, and that was when I gave Lilu a break from him, and he bit me on the ear. He was going to try to mate with me. He was tonguing my ear with his tongue because I thought he was just checking out things, and that's what it was all about. So I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, because like cordensis was pretty much the last species that I was able to acquire of the tree monitors. And when I got them, I was actually shocked at how small, relatively speaking, they were to the rest of the species that I have. Right. And we were talking about this before we were on the air, and it's like kind of depends on how big the animals are that you have of the other species of tree monitor. But in my collection, they're significantly smaller. Like breeding females are probably 100 grams smaller than a breeding female blue, green, black. Right. So that is actually a nice thing about cordensis is they're kind of smaller if that's what you're into in a first time tree monitor. I mean, in my experience, right? So, but then when I started working with them, I realized how like their personality is great as well. Like they are really nice. The cordensis and the blacks, but the cordensis have a great personality. They're not shy at all. Even import ones that I have that have been acclimated, they all are all great that way. They'll come running up to you, running out on you. Yours are obviously initial imports, so you can see the proof in the pudding there.
And I think Lilu can actually hear me pull in the driveway because she's at the glass as soon as I walk in the door from work. And it's just wild. It's like a puppy, and I just love that.
Yeah. My green trees that you see behind me, this is my living room. So when I come in my house, if they're out, they're right there at the glass too. They're always wanting to come out. I think it's so cool how friendly they can get, some of them just really seem to love people if you give them that time, to work with them and everything. So your babies, you socialize those a lot, don't you?
Yeah. I mean, my partner is home during the day right now because they're babies. He's really scared because he's optic neuropathy, so he can't see really great. And there are 5 in the enclosure right now. So I'm usually feeding them when I get home from work, or I'll interact with them on the weekends when I'm, off of work. So it's just, trying to get them as much as, socialized and desensitized, making sure that I'm touching their toes and their tail to make sure that they're not freaked out, with those types of things.
So is your care for them different than your care for adults? When they're first
I interact with them at least once a day, quite a few times. With the babies, I have a bare bone set up for my enclosures. I actually have just slats of wood on the side so they don't go behind them. And I don't use any styrofoam because I use superworms and dermestid beetles as my bioactive, and I'm scared that if they eat the worm, the worms eat the styrofoam, I don't know, I don't think they break it down. Those worms break it down, so I'm scared it's gonna, because they forage for the worms, right? So
Yeah.
so I basically have very bare bones. I'm checking on them at least once a day. If they're all hiding, I make sure they're all out. They come out, that I see them all.
Here's a question
Yeah.
for you. So you said that you have your bioactive setup, you have the dermestid beetles and superworms in there, and obviously the superworms will probably pupate in the substrate and turn into beetles.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I've found, and I prefer not to feed superworms to anything, just a choice, because I find that that's what happens. If any superworms get into the substrate, then they pupate, turn into beetles, and then those beetles will go on to reproduce. And every once in a while, I'll find, superworm, small superworms in the nest box soil and stuff. And I've had it before where I've had a little superworm auger a hole into an infertile egg. They don't seem to touch the fertile eggs, but do you ever get that problem with yours? Like, do you ever find superworms in your nest box substrate?
So I got the magnifying glass when I know it's right around her laying. So we are like really watching her to see if she's eating yet.
Yeah.
And then if she's eating, I'm going and looking all around. I did notice that the one time when she laid outside in the substrate, there was one that was eaten, but at the same time, there was, I think, 5 other eggs. So we really try to get them as soon as possible. Or if my partner, like, I'm actually 3 miles from my day job.
Yeah.
So my partner will be like, I think she laid, I'll come home at lunchtime, and I'm like on it as much as I possibly can be. So
yeah, because
I haven't noticed them eating like fertile eggs, but like I said, I'm kind of on top of things.
Yeah, I know that is something that maybe viewers don't even consider with superworms, and I just noticed that's a thing. And it's like, I think the last time I fed tree monitors superworms was like probably at least a year ago, and I'm still seeing beetles in some of the enclosures, and those beetles will reproduce and then lay their eggs in the bark, and then I find superworms in the nest box. So I know if I see a female, getting ready to lay or whatever, I'll always go through the nest box and try and see if I can see any of the larvae in there, right?
Speaking of that, the last time I went through her nest box, I didn't see any in there.
Okay. Yeah, me either. And I have the same thing going on in my cages too. I have the superworms that live in the bottom, and like the tree monitors will dig them up every once in a while, and eat them. Which, hey, whatever.
Yeah,
but so I'll see the beetles, like they'll be crawling around every once in a while, but I haven't noticed them in the nest box.
Okay. I guess if you have the garbage can style and the lid there,
they can't really get.
Right, they can't climb that.
Yeah, but they're climbing the walls. Like I can see them eating the cork bark on the walls.
Yeah,
because you'll see like the little particle hills.
Yeah,
so they can technically get in there easily and just climb up and go in. But there's probably also not a whole lot of nourishment in there. They're looking like we actually will throw like acorn squash or carrots or zucchini to satiate them in normal, the normal, daily. So
you've been very successful with the cordensis, obviously because you produce them regularly. Just run us through the enclosure. How big is the enclosure you have them in?
So I actually have very bare minimum, but to disclosure that I do actually give them a bigger area, like for supervised roam when I'm getting home and on the weekends. I have 2 4 foot high, 4 foot wide, 2 foot deep. Okay. And then I have a breezeway. I use Nibco fittings for the breezeway, and then I use the shower drains when when she needs her private time, when she's when she's preparing to lay, and then after. But I have like a whole bay window that I have I know, totally non-traditional, but I have like a double cat shelf. I have branches. I have cork bark, rounds and flats up on the top of the enclosures and in the front window. So they just, like, when I let them out, I let them do their thing. They, and they are really good most of the time. A lot of times, like, if she is getting ready to lay or has just laid, she'll actually want to walk over to the baby enclosures. And I always say, is that to check the facilities to make sure I'm doing right by her? I don't know, but she's always curious. I know she does get jealous. So I do take her over to see them and things like that to say, because, she's my baby, she's my new perfect baby. So,
So what would you say your basking temp is for them?
So I try to not go any higher than 105. It's like that 95 minimum, 105. Sometimes it might go up a couple degrees. I actually was worried they weren't getting the digestion, and she actually did get burnt a little bit. It wasn't really bad. But I, when I went to the vet it's Dr. Stahl and Sieves that I go to, because they, he obviously was breeding the tree monitors. I guess he still is. And pretty much everybody has had like tree monitors or something close to some type of monitor there. And I feel comfortable. And basically, Dr. Noah is the person that said, you want to have it minimum 95, maybe up to 105 is really kind of the goal for,
basking. Okay. And then your ambient, let's say your nighttime ambient, when all the lights are off, what are they kind of sitting at?
So I keep the house at 74. I know that might be on the lighter, cooler side. But it's like I don't want my bill to be any higher. And I always question, because I was like, well, maybe I should put some of the seed mats, the heat mats, and with a thermostat on them and put them in all the enclosures. But I feel like as long as it's above 70, I thought that was a pretty decent. It's not like they're going to get sick. I don't know. I just go by what I'm told.
In my opinion, that seems perfect. So I'm just seeing, because it's all, whatever you're doing is obviously working for them. So everybody would like to know these little.
So what's your? So do you have like a lighting cycle, light and heat cycle? What kind of lighting do you use? And
so I use Casa power strips, and then I use basic 40 degree dimmable, like regular those floodlights, and then I use the Arcadia high output 6%. I think they're called jungle dwellers now, and I try to switch those out every 6 to 9 months. And then I'll also kind of check with the change of weather, right? Because we have the change of climate thing, here in Maryland, and we're not in Florida, so I always have to I'll constantly surface temp check just to see if if that's kind of the things are playing, that is playing a thing into the temps in my enclosure. Obviously I have a Mist King, and I actually have the add-on to try to keep the humidity up, where I spray 6 seconds for every 15 minutes, and then I might need to adjust in the summertime, and then we have one of those electric handhelds of the sprayers that I'll go in and do supplemental spraying. And then I have I really need to work on getting a better hydrometer thermostat kind of measurer, but we just use the basic probe, and I have 2 in each enclosure, one up higher, one down lower in the enclosure, for each of the enclosures. So I guess it's kind of bare bones, but
so do do you keep them on like for like a certain amount of hours during the day? The lights and the heat. Do
Oh
you turn
yeah.
them off, or
So I just do 12 on, 12 off. What I'll do is I'll alternate the basking lights, because I have one area where it's the slate, I have one area where it's the cork round, and I'll turn both of them on in the morning for like 2 hours. And then it'll alternate like every few hours throughout the day. Like I usually do 2 to 3. And then if I notice, like if they've been out, like, because sometimes they just like being out, they like that freedom. And they'll be in their little supervised area. And, or if they eat, like they decide, oh, I'm going to eat, and I'll just keep them on for a little bit longer at night, just to, it's like I'm right. Basically, I'm looking, and my enclosures are right now are like 6 feet away from me. So I'm here and I'm doing my art, but I'm watching them, and just kind of like trying to pay attention to their behaviors and what they want. And
yeah.
So.
Is your spotlight, are you using a halogen, or are you just using a regular incandescent floodlight for your heat? Oh.
Uh-oh, I can't hear you.
Yeah, your mic cut out, Janice.
No, still can't hear you.
Uh-oh, some technical difficulty.
Yeah, I know, right? Of course. Of course this happens.
We'll see if she can get it figured out here.
Yeah. Janice, if you want, you can leave and come back in. You can leave the studio and come back in. Oh, wait. Do I hear you or no?
Are you there?
There you are.
Here we go.
It's because.
Uh-oh.
Oh, no.
You just cut out again.
You cut out again.
No.
Yeah.
Can't hear you, Janice.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, at least Amy's like so close.
I know.
In the comments. Yeah. So somebody actually did ask a question. I guess they didn't hear it earlier, but they wanted me to ask Janice, what is her lay box and what are the temperatures inside of her lay box? So
it's basically one of these small trash cans, and you can hear me now, right?
Yeah.
Well, hold on. Can you answer, I just asked that question before you cut out there about what if you were using the halogen.
I was actually going to look on Amazon, and I actually was recommended these by Matt Kosman to use, and it's like this. I'm so sorry, but anyway, so I'll talk about the trash can where I'm looking for this. So it's one of the smaller black trash cans. I actually put the soil up to about maybe 6 inches to the top, and then I actually brace pieces of cork flat on each side, and then I have 2 pieces of cork flat on the side on the top with like just kind of a corner out, so she can actually go in.
Oh, okay, so the entrance
it's in one of the corners. So it is what I use is a halogen light bulb. It's the 39 watt PAR 20 warm white dimmable. And it's 480 lumens, 5K, 120 volt, I guess, E26 medium base, and then it's the 40-degree flood beam angle for track lights.
No, the only reason I asked that question is, and this is a common thing that I see too. You said one of yours had a little burn on it, and I find that the halogen bulbs, they have a much more focused beam of light, and when they first come out to bask, their body's obviously cool. And it's almost like if the halogen's too close to the basking branch or whatever, that their body doesn't heat up in time for them to recognize that they're warm before their skin actually gets too hot on the surface, and it'll cause that little burn. So,
and she was also gravid when that happened. So it was even more of not knowing that, because she had all of that going on and probably didn't feel all 100% either to know. So Matt Kosman is the one that like steered me to these, because I think I was actually using like a spotlight.
Yeah.
More of like a spot, where this is actually gives more of a like a diffused angle of light.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I use all halogens too, and I use the exact same ones you're describing. And I find that yes, they have a nice cone of light, but something about the centralized beam in the middle seems to get a real hot spot in the halogens. And I've actually, with my enclosures, I mean, I've had a couple get burned as well. And then I was like, oh, why are you burned? And you're not, like, what's going on here? I didn't even burn to start. And then I realized, well, that one's not burned because the basking spot's much lower from the surface of the light bulb. So I went around and measured the distance between the branch and the surface of the bulb.
Right.
That particular bulb that you're talking about, now I have that set. It was a little bit closer, but now I have it set to about 10 inches and I haven't seen anything. So yeah, I've almost like, I've had to sit there and calculate, the appropriate distance where they can still get the temp they want, but that they don't get burned, right? It's a more gradual heating up of the lizard.
So it looks like it might be about 12 to 16 inches away from the actual bottom of the bulb light. And then there's one that's a little bit closer. I actually have since put the Casa dimmers on there. That's kind of where I, when we were talking about temps, I look at the 95 degree. And if there's a little bit up from that, then I make sure it's not above 105 because I think it was getting a little bit hotter. I had the lights hotter than that. And that's what I think did it. So now I feel like I've kind of dialed in I haven't had any issues with her since. So
that's interesting. That's interesting because like I set my basking areas to like it's between like 110, 115. And I've never had any burns, but maybe it's just the type of light that, the lights I've been using all these years, Yeah,
I don't think the burns that I've witnessed, they don't come from the overall temperature of the basking spot, right? So that's not what burns them. I think the burning comes from the transition from their body being really cold. And with the halogen light, like I said, there seems to be a real hot spot on the halogens in the beam. So, and you can put your hand under it and you can feel, where it's hitting your hand at one point. And I think what happens in that situation is they're basking, their overall body temperature isn't getting hot
because it's like a concentrated beam.
And it seems to be, where they're basking, it seems to be in the same spot every time I've seen it happen on the back of the lizard. So, and it's just because, and then if you drop the basking spot a few inches, then you hold your hand under there, you're like, okay, that doesn't feel so hot anymore. So I think it's that transition from them being cold in the morning, coming out basking, their body's warming up, but that spot has an intense, those halogens have an intense beat, like just an intense ray of light. It's centralized right there. And it gets it just hot enough to cause that little blister or burn, right? So that's what I've seen. I see so many monitors with that burn too. So just if viewers are watching this, it's better to have the basking spot further away from the light than it is close, just for that reason. Let them pick up gradually, because the reality is that the overall temperature of the basking spot probably isn't a super focus, like you said, anywhere from 95 to 110, 115 even. They'll just sit under it longer or shorter periods of time to get their desired temperature, right? I mean, if they're always under the basking spot, then it's taking too long. But if they're, they're under it for a couple minutes and then they take off, and that's perfect. But yeah, it's those halogens, and they have that focused beam of light that seems to be central. It seems like the Arcadia halogens kind of have a better diffusion. They don't do that. But if you just get your general hardware store halogens, right? And they're pretty much the same bulb. It's just the lens that they have on them. They're the hardware store ones that I use have almost like a waffle pattern to them. And they just project that one single beam of light down that is just really intense. The rest
it's almost like a magnifying glass on the ant. Right.
Exactly. So that's something that I learned about those halogen bulbs. I mean, I still use them. It's just I had to drop the basking spots to the point where, okay, now even if it was sitting under there for a long time, it wouldn't cause a burn. Right.
Yeah. Some people in the comments are saying, well, this is why I guess some keepers use like a lower wattage halogen, but they use multiple lights to create like a bigger you know, area, which, I mean, that makes sense to me, you know?
Yeah. I think the lowest wattage bulb that, I mean, Janice is describing, like, I mean, in terms of halogens that I've been able to find, at least in Canada, has been like that 39 watt halogen, right? So I unless you want to get into like adapters and stuff, right? So I just buy them in bulk, but I mean, it's easy to combat that like hot spot, like I said, just by dropping the basking log. Like I'll just unscrew it and drop it down a bit. And I've kind of found for my situation, the perfect distance for that halogen bulb from the basking log. But I do find that halogens do pose that problem. Like you could use almost like a 75 watt floodlight at this, the same distance, and it wouldn't cause a burn, even though it has way more wattage. Just that intense beam of light, it seems. But yeah, so that's interesting. And then they were asking about your nest box temperature, somebody in the comments.
Yeah, they were.
So I do about 83 to 80. I think I have the thermostat set at 84, but because of the way I have the heat mat wrapped around the outside, I'll put the probe in, but then she kind of finds the spot she needs. Like I'll kind of do a surface temp check to make sure it's at like that 83 to 85 in like at least one of the main areas. Mm-hmm. And then she finds the spot that she wants. So
do you put the thermostat probe like centralized in the soil, or do you put the thermostat probe up against a wall of the nest box or the heat mat?
Yeah, I put it in the inside wall, down on the side, kind of closest to the left side. And yeah, that's pretty much, I let it ride.
Yeah, okay.
But yes, not Brandon in the main area, in like kind of where it's on the back wall, and I'll check the temps there. And then if she kind of, like I said, she just kind of finds the spot that she likes, and then she lays them.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's higher in the nest box, sometimes it's lower, and
yeah.
Okay.
So I was going to ask, because somebody was asking in the chat, how does that compare to what you do, Brandon? Do you also heat your nest box or no?
I do, yeah. So that's why I was kind of curious, because the way I do it is, I mean, I have my heat mats underneath the box. I mean, I've talked about the little base that I build for it and stuff, but and then I put my heat mat down, and then I put my thermostat probe right on the heat mat, and then I set the box down on that heat mat. So, but I'll also set the thermostat to 90 degrees. So I'll set it to 90. That way, when the female digs down, she can find the right elevation temperature of the soil, and then she'll lay at that depth, right? Or she'll lay off to the side of the heat mat. So it gives the options. It sounds like that's what you're choosing to do. I think what your thermostat probe is set at, like especially if you have the probe on one side of the nest box, that could be very hot on that side, let's say, but she'll just choose to lay at the appropriate temperature or gradient depth, that she wants. So
you're doing it vertically, I'm doing it kind of horizontally.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. I don't think it matters too much. I do have some where I put them like the heat mat on the side of the nest box. For me, it doesn't really seem to make much of a difference anyways, but I mean, I don't have many on the side of the box itself. Having said that though, I'm always like, always get females that, they'll lay perfectly for 5, 6, 7 clutches, then all of a sudden decide one day that they're not happy with what they were using before, and you have to switch it up, right? Yeah. So
well, and I was telling Catherine that like a couple clutches ago, I changed out my soil because it was smelling more funky than like just the normal. And that's when she like laid in the log on the top of the substrate because it was new. So I definitely recommend trying to mix in some of the old soil or substrate that you put in the nest box, as opposed to just replenishing it all anew.
Was it the same mixture of stuff? Like, was it?
It was the same mixture of stuff. She just, I guess it wasn't her smell and where she was used to laying, because I think I had that since she started laying, and I'm like, it is time.
Yeah, they do scent mark their nests,
Yeah.
at least, I've seen them like when they're gravid, wherever they want to lay, they'll just start scent marking it, like rubbing on it. So, and they don't really like their nest disturbed around close to that time, at least the ones that I've had. So it might have been that too. You know what I mean?
How, well, here's a question for you. When you changed the substrate out in the nest box, how close was that to her laying? Was it like a couple weeks before, a day before?
It was at least 2 weeks.
Okay.
Which is when they're starting to, I feel like it was a month, but it could have been 2 weeks. I really didn't time it. And,
Yeah. Because sometimes if you were to like change the nest box substrate because you knew she was about to lay like a couple days before she wanted to drop the egg, she might have been like, oh man, somebody knows where my nest spot is.
right.
Lay in the bottom of this log, right? So I mean, that's I think that's one of the problems when people are having females that are being difficult with laying. They like panic and they're like, oh my God, I got to change this up. And they, continually, within that window of like 3 or 4 days of when she's around to lay, they're like, oh, okay, she's not happy with this because she didn't lay in the last 2 hours. I got to change it up and do this. And it's like, often that does more harm than good. Right.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I've gone to the point where it's like, I know this female's having difficulty laying and, she's pacing around the floor of the enclosure. I'm like, why aren't you using the 2 or 3 or whatever options I've given you? And so, I mean, in order to kind of just shut her mind off, I've done it to the point where I've like put them in the nest box and locked them in there. I've started a hole and I've started a hole in the substrate for them so they could, stick their nose in and see that it gets warmer as it gets down. And I've just put a brick over the whole of the nest box, and just to basically eliminate any other options. I know you're due to lay, and that's not ideal, obviously. I understand this, but it's better than her becoming egg bound.
Right.
And you know what? It's worked. That works too. If they're struggling, that might come with some experience. But if they're struggling, you're like, man, I can't do any more variations of a nest box this time before I know it's like the critical window of her to lay. I'll just lock her in there, right? As long as it's warm enough, she'll probably lay them. That's in my experience. But
So do you, Janice, add moisture to the medium inside of the nest boxes? I know that I do. Yeah. Tell us about that.
When I see them starting to, mate, I always will start getting it in, the good, moisture in there. If I need to, like, sometimes we'll just pull it out, mix everything, all the substrate up in there just to kind of get that airflow and aerate it. And then like leading up to when she's going to lay, then I'll, go in there every few days to make sure because sometimes the top of it will get a little bit drier. So I'll just go ahead and spray a little bit of water in there, just to kind of, keep that moisture in there. So she's happy with it.
In there.
Sphagnum moss, coconut husk, and a little bit of sand. Okay. And then I just kind of get a texture. I'm trying to think. It's not sopping wet. It's not flaky. But like if you were to put your hand down and in, that it would kind of mold like a a space.
Perfect. Yeah. It's curious because, and you when you put the sphagnum moss in that substrate, do you put the sphagnum moss on the surface or do you mix the sphagnum moss in? With
I mix it in because that helps hold some of the moisture, but it also kind of aerates too. Because if the soil needs the moisture in the sphagnum, it pulls from it and vice versa. So
that's interesting because I remember the first time I ever bred a tree monitor were the McCrae, and I had soil sand mixed in the nest box, but I also mixed a whole bunch of sphagnum moss in there because, again, I was new to tree monitors. I was like, more of a tropical climate. There's probably lots of moss and leaf litter and stuff wherever they're nesting, thinking that. So I put a bunch of sphagnum moss in there, and she loved it. I mean, she loved it. I don't do that anymore, but but it is interesting. And like the moss, I wonder oftentimes that sphagnum moss, if it mimics like almost like a root system in there and helps maintain burrows in all the stuff, compact it down, right? So that's a good add to a nest box, I think, for sure.
Yeah, that's what I use. Like I use just the moss. That's it.
Oh,
yeah, I use just the moss. And then like when I see females when they're breeding, that's when I add my water, and I'll dump a bunch of water. And then by the time that the female is ready to lay, which is like 30, something days, there's actually a moisture gradient. So it'll be like kind of dry on the top, but then at the bottom, it'll be very wet. And so I just noticed, like they'll just go in there and they'll find like the perfect moisture for their eggs, and that's where they lay. And I actually tested it out once because I was like, oh, I wonder if I like, is she doing this on purpose? Let me just collect the moss that was right directly around the eggs. And I used that in my deli cups to incubate the eggs. I did not add any water, and it worked. They hatched out fine, So obviously these girls, they know, they know what's good for their eggs. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Catherine, when you put the sphagnum moss in there, did you really try and I mean, it doesn't compact very well, but compact?
Yeah. So like initially, because I buy these like big bricks
of it.
I think it's like I don't remember maybe it's like Exoterra, but they're like these big bricks, and I have to put them in gallon buckets because they're dry and compacted, and then they just soak up all the water, and they're like a huge bunch of moss. And then like I'll stuff it in there like initially, like I'll just stuff, as much as in there, and it will like settle down like over time, you know what I mean? And then I'll add more on the top,
And sorry, I don't know if you said this already, but does your female dig down to the bottom typically, or she just
mine? Okay, so she will dig down. So I have a big trash can. I use big trash cans, like the 13-gallon ones.
Okay.
So it's like, almost around like 3 foot tall, because this one female I had was extremely picky, and she kept wanting to dig down and dig down. And when I use smaller depth nest boxes, she would just keep digging, and then she eventually would scatter. So I was like, whatever, I'll do the same thing I did with my veiled chameleons. Because I also had veiled chameleons that were really picky, and I used trash cans for them too. And then they laid with no problem. So I was like, okay, let's just try it with the tree monitors. So I did that, and she would dig down like 2.5 feet, 2.5 feet, almost to the bottom. And it was quite moist in the bottom of that area. And then that's where she would always lay eggs every single time, and I used to use heat on the nest boxes too. I used to do it on the side like Janice. And like she never laid near the heat. So, but I also keep it pretty warm in my house. I mean, it's pretty warm, and in the cages are warm. And I was like, whatever, like, why am I putting the heat on the nest boxes? I'll just take it off. And it was fine, but again, like my house is like 78 degrees. So so it's not like
Janice, when you put the heat mat on your nest box, do you put it on the inside of the nest box, or do you stick
I put it on the outside, and I actually use one of the 10 by 20 Vivisons, and the actual lip of the trash can, I basically slip it right under that there, so it keeps it kind of consistently under that against the trash can.
Okay.
Like at first when I was doing it, I was using like duct tape to hold it against there. I didn't need to. And then I have all that stickiness from the duct tape. So I'm like, I don't need that. Yeah.
Well, it's funny because I was just thinking of something. I was like, oh, the trash can. Because I know with my heat mats, I put them under the nest box, but the heat mats that I use, they have a adhesive side, right? They're meant for like sticking on the bottom of a frame. And I just know that what I do is I just stick a plastic sheet on top of the sticky side. So it's like, now it's not sticky anymore and I stick it under, but I wondered if you could like, if you're using a small trash can, if you're using a standard heat mat like I was, and you stick it to the outside side of one of the trash cans, and then you double up the trash and set that inside of another one. Right? Yeah. And then it sandwiches it in there. You never have to worry about it like falling off or anything.
Or I could even I have like industrial shrink wrap too. I could just shrink wrap it too.
Yeah. So, okay. Interesting.
So I do have a question, a couple more questions. So what do you do as far as diet and supplementation? Like what's their diet? Do you use supplements, and how often are you feeding everybody?
So I use the Sticky Tongue Farms Mineral, and I actually gut load. I sprinkle that on the veggies. And then we use like the is it bad ASS? I don't know how to say that on here. I'm just making sure, but I use that chow. And I feed the bugs and gut load them. Like we really keep up on that. And then we do 75% insects. So it's mostly dubia and crickets. Obviously, if they forage for super worms, I want to get back into grasshoppers because I know they're so good for them. And then usually, I mean, my Lilu and Corbin are spoiled. They only want quail. So I do day-old baby quail thawed out, and then we do quail eggs. So basically 1 to 2 days a week, we do the whole prey that way. They don't like pinky mice, so which they can kind of like mess with health issues sometimes too anyway. So if you're feeding too many, so I just keep them at the quail. I do give chicken egg once in a while, like very rarely though, because I know it's so fatty that it's really not good for them. And using it too much.
So are you feeding them daily?
Yeah, I'm hand feeding them with tongs. We have cups in there. We make food available all the time. And then also, and so the nutrients, I'm using that Mineral basically 4 to 5 days a week. And then we'll do I think it's the Zoomed vitamin without D3. And then the Mineral has the D3 in it. So,
Okay.
You're using the Mineral indoor version. I don't even know if Mineral makes that outdoor version anymore.
Yeah.
They used to sell one that included D3 and also one without D3. And so I didn't know that they still, I don't know if they still make the outdoor, but yeah, that Mineral's good stuff. Okay, so you're feeding every day. See, and I'm feeding every second day.
Really? I feed every day too.
I don't know how to say. I'm an Italian grandmother. I want them to eat. If they want to eat, I let them eat.
Yeah,
but it's mostly insects. Like I'm just feeding like mostly crickets most of the time. I mean, I'm always dumping crickets in there. Like if I start to see the crickets like dissipate, I don't see them anymore. Then I'm like, oh, time to throw in another like 3 dozen,
Yeah.
Well, and I don't know if it's because it's the winter, but they don't even want quail right now. They'll eat the eggs, but they don't even want the quail. So
interesting, because the cordos that I have, they eat anything. I mean, they are probably, aside from the black tree monitors, they are the most ferocious feeders ever. And it's like they're on average much smaller than the rest of my stuff, and they will eat way more. Like if I offered them quail, they'll eat way more quail than a blue tree would. Like they're just pigs. I mean, I'm only feeding every second day, but it's like I have a female cordensis that would eat 4 or 5 quail in a sitting. And she's tiny. I'm like, every time she's finished, I don't like feeding quail too much, but like she just they're garbage cans. It seems there's no end to how much they want to eat.
I'm scared to do that because they're so dense. Like I always have like a hand sprayer to give them water after quail and quail eggs because it's just such a dense,
Usually with the tree monitors, at least the ones that I've had, most of them do not overeat. Like they know when to stop eating during like one sitting, except for one. There's an exception to that. So like the first tree monitor that I ever hatched out, I still have him. He's like 14 years old now. Wow. And he will overeat. Like I've seen him, like if I let him eat as much as he rodents, quail, things like that, not insects. He's good with that. But like the meaty items, if I let him eat as much as he wants in one sitting, he will throw up. He will. Yeah. Yeah, he's insane. But none of my other ones do that. I'm just like, I'm like, okay, here's, whenever you stop eating, I'll stop feeding, and they're fine. But it's just him. I don't know, maybe because I spoiled him too much when he was first born.
And Corbin, he's the wild caught, so he will eat all. But I'm guessing that's because, well, hey, I don't know when I'm getting another meal because I'm used to being out in the wild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
interesting. Yeah, they definitely have different feeding personalities for sure. Cordos are, in my experience, pretty ravenous feeders. But
I also noticed too, so I actually had a single clutch baby, and it was so hard to feed the baby. I had to throw the crickets in because usually I'm like 2 to 3 days in, I'm like trying to get ripping heads off of crickets, trying to give them food, squeezing the guts out so they can taste it, and like doing like the fishing thing, touch it to their snout, pull it away, and this baby, it went 2 weeks without eating from me. I'm like, I'm scared now, so I'm just going to start throwing crickets in.
Aww.
And so it was eating. I just, yeah, because it's like if there's a bunch of them, they're like, ooh, what do you have? Oh, well, I want that because you got it. And then they're trying to, like the one baby of my 5 right now, he was trying to bite the face of one of the other babies because he was eating something. I'm like, hey, whoa.
That's okay in babies. It's when the adults do that you start to get worried.
Yeah, I'm still worried because they're still very fragile. And
yeah,
I know their teeth probably aren't hard like that yet, and I worry. Even like when I had the 4 from the summertime I guess the spring into summer, and I had 4 in the enclosure, and they were going crazy for the quail. I'd rip it up into like, I was doing like 8 pieces, and I'd give them each a chunk. And then if the one finished and the other one was eaten, he'd be going like right on the other one. And I'm like, okay, I can't give them to you quick enough. Chill out.
Yeah. So tell us about incubation. So like after you get the eggs, like what are you incubating the eggs in, and how do you set that up, and what temperatures are you using, and that kind of thing?
Okay, so I forgot what the type of, it's like one of the main thermostats. I actually have heat tape that is on the so first let's just start. So I have a beer cooler. I do the heat tape, which I think is 6 inches in width, and I do it on the bottom and the back. And then I have the thermostat, that attached to the thermostat at 85 degrees Fahrenheit. And then I put the probe on the outside of the sim container, and tape it on there right at the level where the eggs would be. Mm-hmm. And then I use reverse osmosis water only in the bottom. And I probably fill that about 1/2 to 3/4 under the grating of the sim container. And then if I notice, so I'll kind of let them go a week and to see if they stabilize, because some will have like dents sometimes. If the dents aren't out like after about a week, then I will get some of the sphagnum moss, use the reverse osmosis water, squeeze it out as much as I can, and then put that under the eggs. And then I check back weekly until the dents are out. I don't put a hole in the sim top. A lot of people do. I don't. But I really wonder if it has something to do with the reverse osmosis water, that it filters out some of the other things that might make some of the other eggs pop. I don't know, because I know people, if they don't have the holes in it, sometimes their eggs will actually burst. So I don't know what that's about.
If your eggs are swollen up because they're too hydrated, and then you like open the container that they're in, right? If you have a egg container, like a sim container with a lid on it, and it's 85 degrees in there, and you bring that out of the incubator and you pop the top on that, if their eggs are really swollen, just the temperature change, like, your car windshield, if you dump hot water on it when it's frozen, it'll crack, right? I think that's what does it.
Oh, that makes sense.
And it's when the eggs are really, really swollen. Why? This is a question. Why reverse osmosis water?
I feel like the water system, like I'm a public water, so I don't know what's in that and what's not in it. And if I can cycle out as much of the contaminants that are in that, like we actually, the water system near us had crypto, and I'm guessing it's from rats because it was in the city. So I know it's not going to affect the tree monitors, but it still scared me, you know? So I'm trying to, I don't know. I just don't trust tap water anymore.
Better to be safe than sorry, right?
Yeah. I was drinking tap water up until I got the reverse osmosis. And then like, you know, you see all these things, you know, about people getting sick. And I'm like, what are they getting sick from? And I can only think like tap water is one of the big culprits.
Yeah.
So, I was just wondering because if you think again, I'm a science teacher, so I always think about things like that. But RO water, it has zero solutes; it's just pure water, right? So, if just thinking out loud, I don't. You're obviously using it just fine, but I would think that if your eggs were exposed to RO water, that the water would be more likely to diffuse into the egg because the egg is filled with solutes, right? So proteins and things like that. So water would wick into the egg at a faster rate than if you used water with dissolved minerals in it. Right? Just by the simple diffusion. So I was wondering, maybe do you notice that your eggs really swell up during incubation, or?
Not like sometimes yes, sometimes no. I've actually even used distilled water, and they were fine because the water isn't really touching the egg. So.
Yeah, distilled is just RO water. I was just, but if your eggs aren't in direct contact with like substrate, then it wouldn't matter. But if they are, like if you had it in your moss, or if your eggs were in vermiculite and stuff, and it was in direct contact with actual liquid water and not just humidity, then you would expect that water would diffuse into the egg faster with RO water.
Right. Yeah. And you would think that would make them possibly
make them swell up, right? Because that would be like, that would be like a hypertonic situation, right? Where the water wants to travel into the egg and make it swell and then burst. But I mean, it only really matters if your egg is in direct contact with substrate, right? If it's just air humidity has no dissolved solutes anyways.
Right.
So I'm just curious because I've never used RO water. I am on well water, and my well water is filled with minerals, right? It's clean. It's just because it comes from 100 feet below the ground, it's filled with calcium and iron and everything. And I mean, I'm not worried about contaminants from like public water. So I just use that. And I mean, I have good luck. You clearly have good luck. So I was just curious. Just in my mind, that's what I think of when I think of RO water. People making a choice to do this for what's the reasoning?
Right. And I also wonder too, should I be giving them, like, is the multivitamin that I'm giving them, if they aren't getting some of the minerals in the water that the reverse osmosis is pulling, should there be a supplemental mineral that I should be giving? That's a question that I recently had because
you gut load your insects, right? So I mean, that's what I do, but my gut load is like fruits and vegetables, like colorful fruits and vegetables, because they have all types of different things, you know, and like they get vitamins from that, you know, from eating the gut load of insects, you know. I just supplement with calcium and D3. I don't supplement with vitamins because they get it from the bugs, you know.
Yeah, I don't think you have to worry about that. Like, well, if you're feeding whole prey occasionally, for sure, it's fine because they're filled with all the so like quail, and if you feed mice and eggs, there's lots of D3 and calcium and minerals and all of that stuff. I know with my gut load regimen with the crickets, I'll make sure that when I gut load, it's like I'll put in the gut load 12 hours before I intend to feed. So like the night before. And that way the crickets are feeding. So when you feed the crickets to your tree monitors, the crickets are all filled with everything they
Mhm.
The good stuff.
the
Yeah.
good stuff, right? Like when the tree monitors are eating the crickets' abdomens are popping and there's orange goo and
Yeah.
falling out.
Mhm.
So they get everything mineral wise they need from that.
Yeah.
Well, and so I just started back feeding them minerals because the doctor at Steve said, well, the mineral doesn't have anything about, different vitamins, or I think it was vitamin A that she was mostly concerned with because for like shedding and stuff.
Yeah.
She's like, you may want to consider doing it like once a week or once every other week.
Yeah.
So if we miss it or we miss a week, it's not a big deal, but at least we can say that, hey, they are getting something monthly in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you're like for your gut load, like, I mean, I throw a whole bunch of different stuff in there, but
Some
part of it,
carrots.
part of it is carrot and squash, right? And those are super high in vitamin A.
Mhm.
And as long as
Yeah.
you haven't
Oh, go ahead, I'm
digested
sorry.
that out, it's just contained in the cricket's guts, then that's getting directly transferred to your lizards, right? So gut loading is super important. I think that's,
Agreed.
focus on gut loading your bugs really, really well. I think that's been a key to like longevity and success in breeding for me with many species that I've done, is just taking the time to gut load properly, right?
Mhm.
Nutrition is everything. You are what you eat. So
Right.
yeah, that's interesting. Huh.
And if we in season we have mulberry bushes in our yard, not really intentionally, but we'll put the bramble in. We'll wash it really good with like the baking soda and throw that in with the bugs, so they have that because I know that's pretty nutritious.
Yeah, I think it's high in calcium, mulberry maybe. I do the same thing with dandelions around my farm. I'll just like in May and June when they start to come up out of the ground like crazy, it's like I'm using those for sure because they're really high in calcium minerals,
yeah.
right? And
Mhm.
the crickets, they eat the dandelions, but they eat enough of it, But yeah, it's just seasonal. A variety of stuff to feed the crickets. That way, you're covering all your bases too, right? So,
Mhm.
and then again, even with your supplementation, like a variety. Who knows if any of these commercial calciums have everything they need, right? So if you alternate different brands of calcium powder every once in a while, you're probably covering all those bases too, right?
Mhm.
So, but yeah, I think you probably get most of the nutrients you need just from some whole prey, but then gut loading your bugs really, really well.
Oh,
Especially
yeah.
cockroaches. I mean, cockroaches will eat a whole bunch, like relative to each individual cricket. So,
And
yeah.
then like I had a friend recently, that's why like I'm really trying to stick to 1 to 2 days of whole prey because he found out that his tree monitor was sick and he thinks it's from when it was with someone else and they were just feeding it only like egg and mice, the female, and so now he has to most likely retire it. And I'm like, that's my story that I use. Hey, don't continually feed.
Is
whole
it like
prey.
fatty liver disease? Does it have fatty liver disease? Is that what he?
I don't know. I didn't really haven't get an update, but and you probably know the person. I don't want to like call him out.
Yeah, don't say it. Don't say it. Don't say
But
it.
basically, the monitor had its eyes are like weeping, and they think that it's heart related, like maybe a
Oh.
congestive heart. But I don't know the update. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I definitely use that story. Oh, I want to feed all like chicken egg and all this, and I'm like, try to reel it back a little bit.
Yeah.
You see that a lot. I've seen that a lot up here where I am, where people don't have great access to crickets because they're rural or not in an area where there's a good cricket supply. And they do feed a lot of egg and they will feed a lot of rodents and quail. And it's like, yeah, I mean, you can really overdo with that stuff. And once you get a female to the point where she's obese like that, it's like, it's really hard to bring them back. Like, so
Yeah.
I mean, I feed everything. Like I do quail, I do mice. Sometimes I do scrambled egg, crickets, roaches, the whole 9 yards. But I find that like the whole prey, like quail and mice are really, you got to watch that. But like they have their place, right? It's like if I have females that are like breeding like crazy, and they're burning off all those fat reserves producing eggs. It's like, sure, I'll give you a couple mice once a week or whatever, right? Like once a week top. Just to kind of give them that boost. And that seemed to always work, but you really have to know your animals and know what a healthy body type looks like versus one that's just getting too fat, because, and especially it's like, oh, you didn't lay eggs in the time frame that I expect you to lay eggs. I'm not going to feed you any more mice, because now that's just too much energy, right? You're just going to start storing it all as fat if you're not laying those eggs. So the variety in diet is good. And mice, I think, for me, seem to be a good part of that, but you have to use it sparingly, and you have to know the situation to use mice, right? Like Catherine was saying earlier, I don't think you can't overdo it with bugs, really, you know? But then I have some species of monitors that are like really, really high in their metabolic rate, and, you know, they won't breed worth a crap unless I feed them mice. So it's a, you know, it's a guessing game. That sort of thing comes with, like, I guess, a little bit of experience, maybe knowing what to look for and stuff like that. Like, I've had the luxury of doing it for years now, so I've made lots of mistakes, but I've also learned what to do and when, right? So yeah, you know, I know lots of people demonize mice, and for good reason, because if that's what you're feeding exclusively, then forget about it. You're never going to breed them. But they do have their place. Are they receiving rodents in the wild? Probably not. But, you know, maybe the odd time. But you know, again, they're in our care, so we have to do their nutrition, right? So nothing that they eat in captivity is something that they'd eat in the wild, period. So I don't really concern myself with that. It's just looking at the healthy body weight, right? Because I have seen lots and lots of fat lizards fed on eggs and rodents, because that's what people had access to. And
All right, so we are at an hour and 11 minutes. So before we wrap things up, Janice, is there anything else you want to share with us? Like, do you want to tell people how they can contact you if they want some babies? And
so the babies will be ready in about a month for shipping, pending weather. And you can find me at Fifth Element Reptiles at gmail.com. You can find me on Amazon, Instagram and Facebook, and you can find me under Janice Horochak too at on Facebook. I'm pretty active in Messenger. So yeah, feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Yeah.
Okay. And Brandon, did you have any like other questions or anything else you wanted to ask Janice before we wrap up?
I think we covered, I was more, trying to get to the bottom of, obviously she's very consistently successful with the Cordos, and so we always like to get a good scope of what someone who is successful is doing, right? Because sometimes there's things that are much different. I think we covered a lot of the critical things. I think we're good.
Yeah, I know, because you know how it is. We'll end the podcast, and then we'll be like, "Oh,
we should ask this." I'm sure that'll happen this time, but yeah, it seems. No, everything's. I think we covered most of the stuff. I mean, unless we can. There's some nitty gritty details.
And like I got all the points. Everything somebody messaged me. People messaged me. So covered all of that. All right. So I guess we'll wrap things up. And thanks everybody for joining today. And thank you, Janice, for being the guest. Thank you, Brandon, for having me. It's awesome. All right. And then we'll be back on again in 2 weeks. So stay tuned for that. And I guess everybody have a good weekend.
You too. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Janice.
Yeah, thank you.